Imagine finding out the very foundation of your home is crumbling. That's the reality for hundreds of families, and it's all come down to this one critical court case that's going to decide the fate of the Signature View apartments. Will they be repaired, or will they be demolished entirely?
Just let that sink in for a second. That's a direct quote from the court documents. It's not just some technical description, right? That is the exact moment your home stops feeling like a safe space and starts feeling like a real, immediate danger.
Okay, so let's really set the scene here. We're talking about the Signature View apartments, where for the folks living there, home suddenly became a pretty scary word. And we're not talking about a few cosmetic cracks here and there. Nope. These were big, scary signs of a deep, systemic failure. Something wrong with the very bones of the buildings.
And get this, look at how specific these problems were. We're talking wide, deep cracks in the beams and columns. You know, the actual skeleton of the building that's supposed to hold everything up. Ceilings were literally falling down inside apartments. The steel bars holding the concrete together, rusting from the inside out. It got so bad that officials had to step in and label the buildings dangerous and totally unfit for habitation. This wasn't a minor issue. It was a full-blown crisis.
So, when a building is this sick, who do you call? You can't just slap a Band-Aid on it. You need a specialist. And that's exactly where the structural engineers come in. Their job was to act like forensic doctors, to look past the symptoms, the cracks and the rust, and figure out what was truly going on with the health of these buildings.
And that's a huge question, right? When people's lives are on the line, how do you even begin to figure out the true state of a building? These engineers were basically detectives. They were on a mission to find all the hidden clues in the concrete and steel to answer the ultimate question. Could these buildings be saved, or were they a lost cause?
And they had a really methodical game plan. First up, the visual inspections. Boots on the ground, seeing what they could with their own eyes. Then they brought in the cool tech, non-destructive testing, which is kind of like giving the building an X-ray to see the rot happening inside. After that, they built these complex computer models to see how the buildings would handle stress. And for the final piece of the puzzle, they literally cut out samples of the concrete and steel to test their strength in a lab. Talk about a thorough scientific investigation.
All right, so after all that incredible detective work, what was the final verdict? What did the evidence actually say about the health of these apartment buildings?
This is really the moment of truth, because these findings, well, they were going to be the basis for a decision that would change the lives of every single person living there. And what they found was pretty damning. First off, this wasn't some new problem. The experts called it progressive and systemic deterioration. That's a fancy way of saying the rot was everywhere, and it was getting worse by the day. The buildings were literally struggling to hold up their own weight. And the root cause? Turns out it was a double whammy. Cheap, substandard materials used when they were first built, and then years and years of poor maintenance that let everything fall apart. The bottom line was a huge risk to everyone living there, especially if an earthquake were to hit.
So, with a diagnosis that grim, everyone, the experts, the court, was staring down a massive choice. Do you try to perform a really complex, maybe even risky surgery to fix it? Or do you have to admit that the patient, the building itself, is just beyond saving?
This is really the heart of the whole dilemma. The evidence was pointing in two totally different directions, and both paths had massive, massive consequences. There was no easy answer. Repairing them, demolishing them, both options came with a whole host of their own problems, costs, and headaches.
So let's really break this down. On one side, you've got repair. The goal is simple: strengthen the buildings that are already standing. But the problem was the decay was so bad, experts weren't even sure it was possible. And even if they pulled it off, nobody could guarantee it would be safe in the long run. Then, on the other side, you have demolish and rebuild. It's the ultimate clean slate. You get a brand new, safe building that meets all the modern codes. But it takes way longer, and it's incredibly disruptive for all the residents. As you can see, there's just no perfect, easy choice here.
But, this whole thing isn't just about concrete and steel. It's also about responsibility, about who should be held accountable. I mean, how did things get this bad to begin with? The court realized it had to dig deeper than the cracks in the walls and start looking at the promises that had been broken along the way.
And that brings us to this number, 30 years. That's a long time, and that's exactly how long the Delhi Development Authority, the DDA, had promised they would maintain these buildings.
And here's the kicker. According to the court, that 30-year duty was, and I quote, not properly discharged. So all those systemic failures we were just talking about, they weren't just some random accident. The court linked them directly to this failure to keep that promise
which just made the initial shoddy construction problems 1,000 times worse.
And this is where the story gets even bigger. This is the moment it stops being just a construction dispute. The court brought in one of the most powerful and fundamental rights in India's constitution. Article 21, the right to life with dignity.
And by doing that, the court made this incredible, powerful connection. It basically said, hey, having a safe home isn't some luxury item. It's a fundamental part of living a life with dignity. Suddenly, the structural safety of a building wasn't just an engineering problem anymore. It was a human rights issue. And that set a huge precedent for how cases like this might be handled from now on.
So that's where we'll leave it. You've seen the expert evidence. You've seen the question of responsibility. And you've seen how a fundamental human right to a safe home is hanging in the balance. So I have to ask you, if you were the one making the call, what would you do? Repair or rebuild?